I need like some thinning, and I need to wash my face more, definitely. And also, I'm not wearing the same shirt I was in like 2 other videos. This is actually a different shirt, but it has these like laundry stains from like, I don't know, a lot of my clothes have that. I just don't really care. I think it's probably because of like particular sort of fabric. And so it gets this sort of, I don't know, whites with colored sort of stuff. Oh, that sounds wrong. So I was thinking of like tech and how to like summarize it. Oh God, I always cringe when I'm like, oh no, I'm accidentally doing the wrong sort of filming technique, right? And I was doing portrait when I should be doing landscape, right? That's what it's called. But what are the big things in the world today, at least for like first world people? You know, third world quote unquote people have it too, right? Smartphones. Like, people in the third world or in the developing, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, have smartphones, you know? And then people are like, oh, you're poor, then why can you afford a smartphone? Well, maybe it's because, you know, you got a smartphone like, you know, in 2013 or something. Or maybe it's because, you know, in America, we're all in debt. In America, at least, we're all in debt perpetually. Or maybe in China, smartphones cost like $2 or something. I don't know. What goes into branding, what goes into price, what goes into everything, and the decisions and the reciprocations that happen in the world. Is it all stunting? That's my question. The economy, the formal economy, the informal economy, the social economy, social capital, human capital, literal capital like machinery, organizational capital. What is all that shit? You know? What is organized crime? What is all this shit? What is the chance of me falling into some sort of, you know, pit, or like there's a cave-in or whatever that's called, when like, you know, in Peru this happened because they were mining for like, I don't think it was gold, but like maybe gold or something else, platinum, I think maybe. And so there was this, whatever that word is for when the ground falls from under you, a sinkhole that opened up, and like people have these closets opening up into just, you know, void. It's like Made in Abyss, but it's not an anime. It's just, you know, wanton profiteers fucking over the lives of people who, you know, global capital doesn't care about. And that, you know, me saying this probably doesn't help them either, you know, but it's spreading awareness, and it's me performative wokeness or whatever the fuck shit, whereas I should be focusing on my own goddamn self, or whatever, you know, like fucking conservatives and liberals and the ideas, and like, yo, why are you talking about this? It's a complex idea. And I'm like, oh no, you're not gonna listen to me. The attention economy, basically. So what is the attention economy? The attention economy is FANG, right? So FANG is FAANG. That's Google, Netflix, Amazon, Apple, Facebook. FANG. So what are the big like institutions of the internet, you know? Before we had a hunter-gatherer world, and then we had what did we have? We had a 13 billion years ago, there wasn't life. There were just kind of like the forces of the universe kind of like organizing themselves. Hyena forces, berserk. Then life began, and that's kind of our kind of biocentric perspective. And what was that, like 4 billion years ago, with like amoeba and protists, protozoa, and all that shit. Then all this sort of shit happened with like cross influences and like fusions of life and mitochondria into humans, and humans are like 300 million years old. No, I think we're 300,000 years old, and humans are just the development from the limbic system to more cooler systems. So we're not reptiles, and reptiles themselves are a part of this kind of big mixture of shit, and like the dinosaurs went extinct, you know. Then we digged up the dinosaurs and we're like, yo, I like dinosaurs. That's the one thing I like about the past. You know, any 4-year-old will tell you, I like dinosaurs. If they're a girl, they can't because they have to like the color pink. But if they're a boy, they can because you have to like dinosaurs if you're a boy. If you're a girl, you like puppies. That's right. You know, stay in your lane, okay? Stay in your lane. So then 300,000 years ago, that's when like modern humans started, Homo sapiens, or whatever you call Homo credensis, Homo habilis, homosexuals. Homosexuals have existed long before humans. Then about 10,000 years ago, you have like the current era, right? Which is like Paleolithic to the Neolithic. Neolithic is when farming starts and people start forming civilizations, stop being hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherer is kind of like the native state of human because, you know, you kind of like hunt down animals with your kind of awareness of how to like track things and your intelligence, and you gather things like berries, and it's kind of like some people think it's cool, like Rousseau, and some people think it's not cool, like most humans alive today who aren't hunter-gatherers, arguably, and probably most people also who pretend to be like, oh yeah, I could be a hunter-gatherer. They're also like, yeah, I like being able to get Sprite from this place, but, you know, like, fuck whoever, like, got it for me because I'm better than them or something, right? So 10,000 years ago is when, like, modern civilization starts around, let's see, this is Africa, this is Middle East and India and China and, yeah, Europe with the testicles that are Norway and Sweden, and then Spain. And Europe really doesn't matter for a long time. It's kind of secondary, right? And so you have these four river valleys that are kind of the start of all civilization, or maybe 5. I forget which of the ones in China was the first, but Nile, Tigris and Euphrates, the Indus, and the Yellow and Yangtze. So that's technically 6 river valleys. And people were like, yeah, rivers are lit. Rivers are really cool. I like rivers. Rivers are like my shit. And so we were like, yeah, let's move to the rivers and let's be religious. And religion has its own aspects, which kind of are debatably restrained to humans. And we kind of say it like, oh, this is our identity, so we don't fuck with animals or like rocks, because animals and rocks are different from us because like they don't think or some shit or some other shit. I want to listen to David Bowie, so I'm gonna listen to the band, or the Jam. The Jam. That's Entertainment by The Jam. Let's see. So you have history, which has this kind of divide that begins to happen, and it's debatably that it's arguable that class is on sort of ethnic lines. There's a sort of like ethnogenesis, and by that I don't mean like literal like, oh, these are the people who are good and these are the people who are bad, right? And like, oh, I have this famous guy, Anaxagoras, who fucking like started my Celtic tribe, and that's why I'm a proud fucking Aryan warrior bullshit who like conquered the rest of the world because like I'm white and shit. And like, hey, if that's the case, if white people really are, you know, like the shit, then how about aliens, bitch? That's right. How about that, you fucking neo-Nazi prick? I hope an alien fucks you in your ass, bitch. So, you have the centrality of society, where at first language is, well, we don't know how language started, but we're kind of uniquely disposed towards making the sorts of sounds that we do, because like other things, aren't as good at, other chimps and apes aren't as good as like making word sounds. And out of the 7,000 languages we have, that's a debatable number because nobody knows what a language is either, or how they started. Out of the 7,000 we have, they kind of cover like all people, except for like maybe you're born as a child and then you're raised by wolves. Then it might be that like, you know, you have a uniqueness to you, but we don't see that as special because we see it as like wolves are like dumb as shit, at least until recently, where we're like, oh, I'm an alpha, you're a beta wolf, or I'm an omega, or I'm a sigma, or some shit, because we like feeling special by like calling ourselves names. That's kind of why we have names, and that's just language, arguably. Everything is kind of formed by language, even sexuality, right? Because there's a certain, catcalling, even there's an intellectual sort of like disposal that kind of makes apes like different from us sexually, because they just look at someone's ass. We're kind of like, oh yeah, she's got to be like this and she's got to cook for me, and that's a whole different thing. But this is kind of the ethnogenesis of kind of class, so you could say it's socioeconomic and stuff like that, factors which are really inherent to all people, because you might come from like one tribe, and by tribe here I mean like literally, I don't mean like some shit like the House of Fulani tribe, which is like 100 million people, and it's like, yeah, I eat with that guy, the Mohammed Fato. I ate with him the other lifetime, where, yeah, we're all in the same tribe. We all know each other because we're like black and Muslim, and we speak this language. Yeah, I've spoken to every single other person who speaks English because I'm part of like the white English. Oh yeah, I know every fucking Irish person, right? Like what is that? So tribe is sort of, literal here, because it's like you're actually like living together. And in this context, you have sort of tribes may kind of stick to each other and use, you my G, yo, you my G, what, yo, and then there might be a certain tribe that gets prestige because they just like do shit better than your tribe, and you're like, ah, shit, we ain't shit. And so, when society centralizes, because otherwise, what are they gonna do? They're just gonna like steal your bitch, right? Take your bitch, and as they say in anthropology, they call it taking your bitch and fucking your shit up. That's what they call it. What the fuck? Elvis Costello. So then, language, people centralize, and it's theorized sometimes, at least to my understanding, I could be completely wrong. I am completely wrong. That there's kind of a lot of violence that comes with kind of the centralization of a civilization, because of like society and shit, and how like humanity is fucked up, and how like Adolf Hitler, did his shit, which was fucked up, really really bad. And then, so we theorize that perhaps that's also what happened with like the Inca and the Maya, who like, is sort of, imagine you're in your life, right, and you're like, oh, so for instance, say you have a kid when you're like 20, right? Then your homie, he has a kid when he's like, I don't know, like 35 years old. So then one decision might be less or more wise. And this is kind of speaking of the development of human civilization like it were life. So it's kind of like an awkward metaphor. But basically, you might have had it worse because you were less experienced in your 20s. But they're still going to have difficulties because, like, well, one, it's hard to talk about human civilization as if it's like this thing going in a like linear movement toward like more civilized. And two, regardless of whether they're 20, like the Mesopotamians when starting civilization, or whether they're 35 when starting civilization. And civilization is a fraught idea, because what is civilization? Is it like a certain size, a certain, trace on the record of world civilizations? Like, for instance, how many societies used to exist that we just don't know the full scale of? Well, anthropologists have a good scale for that, but like, we usually think, oh, you're supposed to like leave shit behind. That's your legacy as a people, right? But I'm getting two little Hitlers. That's a Elvis Costello song. Do 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 do. Damn, where's the album I'm thinking of? So then, ooh shit. God damn it. So then, society progresses. It goes through the agricultural revolution. What is that? The agricultural revolution, which means you can make a lot of food and you can have stuff like the caste system. But the caste system, for instance, they think is actually based on, I'm going to charge my phone, the Aryan invaders, they didn't look like me, but they probably looked like, Iranians or like Central Asians or something like that. And they were like, hey, this is how this shit works now, so that they could like divide and conquer. That's kind of the oldest theory in the book, right? Why isn't this fucking shit charging? Let's see, am I charging? Oh, good. So this is kind of the genesis of religion, is a sense of order and kind of philosophy, and an irrational philosophy, because we shouldn't assume that rationality covers all of perception and that you can reason everything away. Damn, loud people. Okay, well, if I can't find this shit anywhere, I'll just look it up. Wait, essentials. So then you go through the agricultural revolution, and arguably most of the stuff after that is kind of just people fucking around, technology, philosophy, shit like that. You could say we went through a philosophical revolution. Arguably, the biggest next invention is like writing, which helps us kind of keep track of ideas, and that happens in multiple instances. You got hieroglyphics, abugidas, kanji or hanzi. You got alphabets, you got abjads. Then the next big invention after writing is probably the press, which lets you mass produce writing. And the press is right before the Industrial Revolution, which is kind of like, things being cool and shit. And we have a couple industrial revolutions. The first are just for like essentials like clothes. Then so that's kind of the machine does a lot of that stuff. And there's a certain sort of order that the big resources that everybody wants goes through, you know, like everybody wants food, then that becomes easier to make, then everybody wants wood, then everybody wants oil, then everybody wants is this in Spanish? And Juanes. Huh. LVC. Wood, oil. What's the new type? And steel. Food, wood, oil, and steel.
Yeah, that's nice. I happen to have like a whole plastic box of it.
People talking during my videos. I can't tolerate it. Damn. My mom's such a fucking bitch. I hate my mom. I hate my mom so much. I want to kill her. Fuck my mom. I hate her. So then, the agricultural revolution is followed by, I don't know, what do you call it, the writing revolution, which is followed by, well, Rome is one thing, empires, and a bunch of empires happen, which kind of centralize things over time and create different philosophies, governing philosophies, societies, cultures. And the Greeks are important too, because they have like the alphabet, which is cool. And then, so you get the Industrial Revolution, which is focused around, you know, just machines and general mills and stuff like that for mass production, and you know, science and philosophy. Science and philosophy themselves are encouraged by sort of changes in kind of the relationship between religion and politics and Europe, and the exchange between the Islamic and Christian worlds of ancient Greek information, which is not essentially, you know, cool as shit, but it's like in this sort of part of the world where the Roman Empire was and where a lot of civilization has been, because it's just like you got the Tigris and Euphrates and you got the Nile, and Greece is pretty close to both of those. You know, it's like a hanging ball sack right next to there, right? And then you got like Israel, where you get like Judaism and all the Abrahamic religions, and they spread around and around and around. And like Rome uses that as kind of like, you know, we're kind of linking everything together, so we're Christian now. And this is kind of like how society uses, you know, ideology as a means to control and motivate people. Like Muhammad, you know, did a lot of shit, and he was pretty cool. So monotheistic religions over time get to controlling most of Europe and the Middle East, and they end about at like South Asia. But then what is the thing, what is a world like around like the millennium that just ended, the 1000 to 1999, you know, the Prince song? Well, you know, we kind of go back and forth with like empires everywhere, and the Roman Empire falls, which it leaves kind of a vacuum. then different caliphates and sort of stuff over time encroach upon like Europe. This is kind of how it's written, is that like, we don't want Muslims, get out, get out of Spain, come on, man, and come on, Jack, we don't want you. And then we did the Inquisition, which was real bad. And we were close to America, which, then we went to America, and we avoided the Mongols because the Mongols sort of collapsed because they were a bit like helter-skelter, which, that says something about the Mongols. So then, these different colonial empires started. Spain, Portugal were the first ones to do it, but, it was the 1400s, so they couldn't really do much except, like, kill people and ruin their economies. Then, France and the UK started to do a lot, right? And in this phase, the idea of nationhood was still kind of like a foreign concept. Or, well, it was like not a foreign concept, but it wasn't a concept. So then you had, a bunch of countries who by the 1800s, had colonies. But at first it was just like France, Italy, Spain, Portugal. Other people had small colonies, like Scotland had part of Panama before they were kind of like slurped up into England. And Russia kind of expanded all the way east in kind of what one could say is a colonial effort. They had their own sort of divide and conquer thing because their courtiers were, Muslims, just like the Ottoman had Janissaries who were Christian. I think that's right. And let's see, what is the state of the other empires of the world? Well, you had China, which is kind of like, they conquered a lot, but they were kind of a land empire, whereas a lot of Europe was like sea empires, which is, better, worse, but until like the 1800s, India and China, they were the center of the world. India has never quite been united until now. Well, of course, you had Mughals, you had the Gupta Empire, you had all that stuff, but we can see that as kind of like the Roman Empire and stuff like that. They ain't shit, right? This is a very scientific way to view it. So around kind of the 1800s, you had three big Muslim empires, which were the Ottomans, who had like most of, the traditional sort of like Middle East and Northern Africa. You had the Safavids, which had Persia and a lot of Central Asia. And then you had the Mughals, who had India and all that shit. Then you had like Europe, and they were varying levels of organized and industrialized throughout this period. Eastern Europe is a different thing entirely. You had Austria-Hungary, you had a lot of these like inbred sort of Habsburgs, and the Balkans were also controlled for a long time by the Ottomans. Africa, down in Africa here, you can't have like, you don't have plows down in Africa or wheels because it's like you don't have really like big animals to like do, the sort of pulling the shit in sub-Saharan Africa because they'll get bit by a tsetse fly and they'll be fallen. Unless you're in like Ethiopia, then I guess you have that shit. And we kind of like Ethiopia because they're Christian. And then later they're going to consider themselves white, right? But Africa is a bit similar to South America, but for different reasons. So this sort of agricultural revolution, it aids other things like horticulture and whatever, grazing, farm animals, and Guns, Germs and Steel by Jared Diamond, they kind of say basically the development of societies is better like left or right than it is up and down, which is also a good reason why, China might not have succeeded that well, because for a lot of its history it was fighting people to the top, and that's not really an area you can control. Whereas we also had this with like the Vikings and stuff, but the Vikings eventually chilled out and like joined Christendom. Of course, other Eurasian tribes have been like Cenicized and kind of brought into that culture, but it's just too big of an area to like rule individually. But in contrast, Scandinavia, I don't know, I guess it isn't as big. Then Russia, let's go to around World War One, right? Because that goes to around the time the steam engine and all those different engines were created, right? And in Europe, which is the only country that matters, Africa doesn't matter as a country, Asia doesn't matter as a country. In Europe, you have, like 16, 17, 18 countries or something like that. And a couple of them are pretty new. You have like Germany goes all the way to Russia. Russia goes all the way to Austro-Hungary. Austro-Hungary goes all the way to Germany. That's like Central Europe. That's like backwards place. And Germany is like, hey, we're going to kill the whole world. At least that's how it's kind of framed. And we don't really care about micro countries because it's like, who the fuck cares about that shit? Lol. I don't think Ireland was free yet, but there was, yeah. So there was like the UK, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Portugal, France, Spain, Switzerland, Italy, Germany, Austro-Hungary, Russia, Serbia, Montenegro, Albania, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece. So there's like 18 really big countries in Europe, right? And a lot of them are new, either because of like Napoleon or because the Ottomans are like weakening. And a lot of people really like Napoleon, and I can't really explain that. I guess he was pretty cool. And then the Ottomans were the other guys. But Napoleon kind of comes from forces that are arguably divorceable from Napoleon, and there could arguably be like another Napoleon. He just had some like attitude. He could be any guy, but he also couldn't be any guy because people do naturally look for like leaders who are like kind of cool, and he was pretty tall for his time. And pretty cool probably too, and he was from an island, so that also probably made him cool because Jamaicans are from an island and they're cool. Bob Marley, I don't see any flaws in that reasoning. So there's 18 European countries, big European countries, and this is before a lot of like balkanization of these different countries, and Poland becomes a country after this, after World War One. Then it unbecomes a country for a bit. Then it's part of the Soviet Union for a bit, which is part of communism, which is part of this kind of part of the Enlightenment that's like, oh, we should have freedom and we should look at the welfare of everyone. And it kind of goes post-Christianity, and there's this tension between religion and philosophy, where philosophy tries to kind of like improve the world, while religion is kind of like, you got it good, you just got to go to heaven and stuff like that. So there's these countervailing forces of capitalism and communism, And capitalism is kind of meaningless. Oh, I forgot Canada. That's funny. Fuck you, Canada. So then, throughout the 1800s and 1900s, a lot of the world is decolonized in South America, Central America, Africa, Asia, the Middle East, Europe. There's a lot of new countries. And this is, before, after, and during, or after and during mostly. Before, during, after, you have colonialism, then decolonialism, whatever you call it. Some people say colonialism hasn't ended because it's just neo-colonialism. I prefer neo-soul personally. So this is during and after an age of nationalism, which nationalism comes from, in part, it's the Treaty of Westphalia, which influences people to look at the world as made of nations. And in part, it's also the Protestant Reformation, which incentivizes people to kind of break away from the church and from Latin as this kind of daddy language. And there's sort of, the more people self-govern, the more people kind of find pride in, this is Russian literature, like Pushkin, or like, there's these different things during the Renaissance with art and stuff, which caused people over time to sort of have views of history which, think of like, what is progress? And so they see it as, some people see it as, oh, Christendom is progress. And some people see it as, it's the European intellect or something like that, which, the arts and nationalism arises as this sort of democratic impulse at first because of Napoleon and because of these different revolutions, like the American Revolution, the French Revolution. So the governments and the dynasties of all these European nations, some of them are more progressive, some of them are less progressive, and all of them throughout the 20th century are gonna be rocked to shit. Italy is gonna have Mussolini. Portugal and Spain are gonna have their own fascist dictators. France is gonna go through like 5, 6, 7 republics. Denmark is like a fucking backwater at first. Belgium only gained its independence in like the 1800s or something, if I'm correct. The Netherlands, they're getting flooded and shit, and that's what, that's what the whole Flynn effect is about, is that back in the 1900s, the Dutch, or I forget if it was the Belgians, had like an IQ of like 80, but then as socioeconomic conditions improve, they get better IQs because it's like, whoa, I'm actually eating food that's good for me, and I'm not starving, and I'm not some sort of like mud-eating redneck. And that's the thing too. People have prejudices against people, and they say, oh, these people are subhuman, these rednecks are subhuman, these blacks are subhuman. And this is its own sort of loop back around from the start, where you have an ethnogenesis, where in this pie, right, there's a centralized place. Say this is Babylon, say this is Cairo, say this is Harappa, say this is Beijing, whatever it is, or the Incas, it's their central city, and they rule by force, right? And they centralize because power centralizes and desires more power, and looks at it as an order, a civilizing order. That's how we understand it. Like China, they see it as, we have us and the barbarians. There's varying degrees that you can debate as to how ethnocentric people are throughout time, right? How much do they value these empires? But whether they're ethnocentric or not, you have to defend your grip on power, one way or the other. There's different ways to do this. You can force your ways on people. You can adopt their ways. Machiavelli writes about this in The Prince. He says it's best to move to where, you've conquered, because then you can keep an eye on those guys. That's why the Romans at first moved to the border between modern-day France and Germany to keep an eye on them. But then, over time, as priorities changed, as they did more divide and conquer and incorporated these Germanic peoples into their armies, the way at home became more unstable, more poverty, more that shit, more people saying like, "Oh, I didn't get this or that. What the fuck?" I want to listen to some Boards of Canada. Yeah, more people saying that shit, right? And so this is how an empire declines, is when people are like, no taxation without representation. It doesn't decline. We can't see it as, these people are Satanists. I mean, we can, but that's sort of dumb as shit, right? Of course, the people in power and the people who value the past order will value it and see it as like, oh, society has ended. But from an objective standpoint, it's just people want this here, but other people want this over there. So society naturally rearranges itself. There's no such thing as like a move into like decadence or something. There's maybe disorder or stuff like that where we lose technology or ideas or senses of organization that used to happen, but people don't like suddenly go like, I'm gonna do some bad shit for no reason. That's retarded. They do it for some reason, at least. I mean, some people do it for no reason, but most likely there is a rationalization at large, especially for large groups of people. Large groups of people can't act for no reason. That doesn't even make sense. There's gotta be some sort of center, even if that center is just how other people are acting. Like, say there's a bunch of people running away, you also run away. That's a reason you're running away. You're not running away for no reason. So we have to find some sort of explanation to this. We can't look at it. I mean, we could, technically, but it's not very likely that people just act for no reason and that they just act, barbaric or something like that. This is kind of the propagandistic way to view it, is like, oh, these are just like illogical, amoral people, but that's probably not true, whatever true means to you. So, you have the agricultural revolution, you have the revolution of writing. Religion is arguably also a sort of valuable thing in this respect. Like, art is valuable in terms of transmitting, information. Like, for instance, in the anime Dr. Stone, there's this thing where they have this belief, these stories that go around as ways of, like, saving information, right? Because you have to treat it like a normie, right? Like, why the fuck do I want to know about science? So, the reasons we have this knowledge, which is kind of simplified, in religion, is because, we kind of streamline it. We compress the information to what we think is the most important and what is the most entertaining, because that spreads like a meme, right? Just like genetically, you can only spread things that come instinctually, that you can actually come up with an algorithm to do. Like, our own thoughts aren't really like some sort of like from on high sort of like, oh God, give me this sorting algorithm that's the most efficient for sorting this. Most of what we do is happenstance. It just happens to work, but we have the sort of ability to do it. And creativity and models for modeling the world, like I'm modeling the world right now, is just kind of a byproduct of being able to use tools, being able to use our imagination to measure the world and get feedback from it. Words are all made up. Words symbolize relationships. Words symbolize things that happen in the real world. Words symbolize our sense of connection to a greater whole. And so we sort of say, oh, so God is a word. God is the logos. Logos, God, go, 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 go. Logos, God, go, 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 go. And so, meanwhile, circa 1491, right? You have Africa being African, and, all that shit, for the most part. You have North Africa being Muslim. You have most of Europe being, like, Christian or, like, pagan or whatever. Who knows about like Manicheans or like Jains? Did Jains exist yet? Sikhs, Buddhists, and all that shit. Then you have Hindus all up in India with kind of, is this before or after the Mughals? Then you have China is doing their own shit. You have that's a really small Asia. You have the Mongols, you have shamans, you have a bunch of native beliefs from Native America about like Tenochtitlan and like the cactus bird god. Who's that? Quetzalcoatl, or I think that's his name. Skinwalkers and stuff. Yeah. You have Indonesia, which I don't know when they changed from like Buddhist to Muslim and what they were before they were Buddhist, but India had a certain cultural sphere because that's what you get when you have a writing system. You get like to be influential to other people who adopt your sort of beliefs because they're like, you're a cool guy, right? That's kind of what I imagined. But many of these places, so let's sort of do, what is colonialism, right? Well, I'll draw the alphabet. Colonialism is like, seen in the modern sense, inexorably with respect to racism. Which makes sense, but you could argue that colonialism has always existed as long as people have been moving around, as long as like there have been things that have been alive who like feel pain and have been like predated upon or like manipulated by other things. And with humans, we kind of see like, oh, you have a sense of, I'm drawing too many maps, god fucking damn it. But so basically this sense of territory is itself sort of what makes colonialism. Because back in hunter-gatherer times, say 300,000 years ago, you could say, oh yeah, just like, chimpanzees have wars between each other. You could say, this is my land, these are my women, this is my food, and shit like that. But it wouldn't really mean anything. It's not until like, because law, there's written and oral law, and these are different things, right? So this is also why the writing revolution is really important, and the press. So for a long time, we probably speak and say things, and we like exile people for being assholes and stuff like that. So it's really hard to say, what these people did, because all we have from them is like, we have pottery, we have weapons, we have cave paintings, we have bones, we have like clothing, maybe, I don't know what, buildings, stones, like Stonehenge or some shit that are sharpened. And I don't know. What is that? There's the example of those stones inside stones or something. I don't know. I saw it on one of those, Believe It or Not shows with that guy. Like, I think it was some Baldwin. This house is shaped like an upside down cross. Man, that's some good shit, dude. That's some good shit. I like me some skinwalkers. I like me some ghosts. I like me some like Rochester mansions. Winchester or whatever it's called. That's some good shit. So, fuck. The whole question, why does the Industrial Revolution happen in Europe? Well, imagine you have like 6 brothers, right? And you're like, fuck that guy and shit like that, right? Imagine you have 18 brothers, right? And you're like, that brother is from these parents, that brother is from these parents, except you only have one pair of parents or something, and your family line is like this, like bunch of incest, extreme incest, right? Because naturally, power tries to concentrate itself, and it tries to concentrate itself throughout time too. And how do you concentrate yourself throughout time? Well, you have kids. And this is a source of many conflicts. It's a source of, Protestantism, because England is like, oh, I want to have like a divorce or something. A divorce. That would be good. Which, the whole split between Protestants, Catholics, and Orthodox in Europe kind of shows you some things. Like, so Orthodox is the oldest, right? Then it's Catholic, then it's Protestant, right? And America is a Protestant country, which, a lot of America, we benefit because of our geography, which is the shit. Our geography is banging. And we also did the slave trade, which does slaves built our nation and stuff like that. You have a glove there, that's Alaska. You have Hawaii. So this whole colonialism, we're a settler colonial state in America. And some people say, oh, Americans are just like enterprising people. And our founding fathers had the foresight to give credit to people who invented stuff, because they were like they were like the little bitch of their families. That's a technical term, which goes back to kind of how we think of family, how we think of tribes, how we think of ourselves as kind of like individuals or as animals, as a part of a society. And then, God, fuck, that looks ugly. So, this kind of happens alongside the Renaissance in Europe, right? Whereas in the Middle East, Northern Africa, it's kind of split, you know. You have the Tigris and the Euphrates and the Nile are under the Ottomans, but the Ottomans are also a bit, how would you say it? Like, they already have people angry at them and shit. I don't know, why did the Ottomans fall? And the Safavids, you know, they were Shias. But, you know, the Sunni Shia split, you know, they don't really dislike each other that much. Well, I mean, they dislike each other, but I think they don't, like, kill each other or something. Then you have Southeast Asia, which is modern-day Southeast Asia, except for, like, Vietnam, is all Buddhist. And you have China. God, I'm drawing way too many maps. Central Asia. So most of the world is split between, you know, a few of these 18 European powers. It's, you know, Denmark, it's Greenland, Germany gets a few countries in Africa and Papua New Guinea, Portugal, a few African countries, and, you know, Brazil. England, Spain, and France get most of the Americas, the Caribbean, and most of Africa is between England and France. Southeast Asia, that's French Indochina, that was part of France. India was kind of part of England, South Asia. Then, most of Oceania, too, probably colonized and stuff like that. But then you have and then Italy also got a few countries. The Netherlands got Indonesia, and Belgium got the Congo that was not good. It was not good at all. Really shit. So what do you have left in this? You have France and England are winning big in colonialism, right? Spain and Portugal kind of lose out by the end of the 1800s, which is arguably why they start fascist nations. Italy also losing out. It got to the party late. Formed in 1861, I think. Start of the Civil War. Switzerland doesn't give a shit. Good on them. Nazi gold. Germany, late to the party. Denmark, late to the party. Norway and Sweden, they start some colonies too. I think Sweden did, at least, in, like, New Jersey. But, you know, they're also late to the party. But they do, like, you know, they kind of, like, help the Nazis a bit, I guess. But mostly they kind of start to be, like, the Nordic countries who are, like, really cool and stuff. And, like, really, like, happening, you know? They're cool guys. Russia becomes a communist country. Yeah. Then it's the same with a lot of Austro-Hungary. That becomes mostly communist, except for Austria. It's the same for most of the Balkans, which becomes Yugoslavia. And it's the same for Romania and Bulgaria. Greece, capitalist. But do they have a fascist? No, I think they have, like, a king until, like, I don't know when they got rid of their king. But yeah, that's the basic thing. You got these, like, 9 countries doing colonialism. Russia too, probably. You know, you can see problematic things in, like, any people group, like Africans who think, like, you know, you get rid of AIDS by, like, fucking a virgin, but we shouldn't blame that on Africans. That's just a bunch of assholes, right? You know, it depends on, like, whether an institution is backing them. I think that's also an important nuance. Like, Rwanda, yeah, that was kind of fucked. Hutus and Tutsis. Sudan and South Sudan, there's also some sort of racism, sort of religion clashes happening there. Damn. Boards of Canada is pretty lit. So then, yeah, these 9 countries basically split up the entire world. And what's left when you take away the Americas, Africa, most of Asia, and most of Central Asia too, Central, West, South, Southeast, Indonesia, Oceania. So what's left is East Asia, which you have China, Japan, and South Korea, right? And Japan sort of goes crazy, and they take over South Korea, and they take over like a lot of China, right? Then after World War II, China's like, okay, we're joining Russia, and we're also becoming communist, right? So this is how most of the 195 countries that exist today start to exist in the Cold War, right? Whereby these 9 countries lose most of their colonial holdings or just let them go because, you know, they've been bombed to fuck. And the new superpowers are America and Russia, which this is really the biggest reason why America is successful today is because it wasn't bombed to shit during World War II. And also, like, our own colonialism in Latin America and stuff like that. And white supremacy, of course. And, you know. But during the Cold War, you have this kind of sort of 2 or 3 front battle between, you know, there's a Chinese, or 4 front even. There's, or even 5 front. There's a Chinese, there's a US, there's Europe, which the US and Europe aren't always on the same side. And then there's America. And then, of course, there's the rest of the world, right? Which starts things like the non-aligned movement and stuff like that. And during the Cold War, of course, right, you have 195 countries. So then what do you have in terms of foreign relations? You have like 40,000 different ways people can have foreign relations. But the most important foreign relations you can have are either with the Soviet Union, with Europe, with America, or with China, right? You know, South America is kind of America's bitch because we do like a lot of coups and shit because we're assholes. Africa, same. You know, a lot of French people have murdered a lot of African heads of state. Southeast Asia, South Asia, West Asia, you know, similar. But West Asia, during the Cold War, you have the rise of Islamic extremism, which is a reaction to Western ideologies of capitalism and communism, and sort of, you know, it's a reaction itself to like a lot of different shit that I can't really sum up. You have in India a sort of semi-communist sort of arrangement, sort of planned economy, not really communist. Then in a lot of South Asia, Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia, you had like communism. In Thailand and Burma, you had like mostly military dictatorships. It's complicated. And in Indonesia, it's also military dictatorships. And the divide between a military dictatorship and just a bunch of criminals running the country is hard to really distinguish. But basically, you respect one more than the other. Oh, God, my throat hurts. What was I fucking talking about? So then, what wins the Cold War for us? You could say it's capitalism, but you could also say just kind of technology and being, a wealthier part of the world from the first place. Which, the Soviet Union still checks us on multiple things, but we get the computer faster because we got the Nazi scientists or something like that. Don't take any of these as facts, Just because you're a Nazi doesn't suddenly make you smart, It actually makes you kind of stupid. So there's different sort of industrial revolutions. There's kind of cloves, like the cotton gin and stuff, mills. Then there's the engine for a car. There's electricity, steam. There's oil. Oil's a good one because it's much easier to use than steam, and it kind of miniaturizes things and individualizes things so that they're cheaper and they can be used by individuals. So you can't have a steam-powered car. That just would be too inefficient. You'd have to carry all the wood on you and all the charcoal on you, right? So oil kind of brings plastics and all this kind of like new technology, and oil is one thing. Then you also have transistors, which you could argue that, we just kind of outpaced the Soviet economy by kind of marketizing our own economy. Because after the Bretton Woods system fell down, because, the U.S. was no longer kind of trading with the rest of the world and stuff like that, and colonialism had fallen out, and we were competing with the Soviet Union, and OPEC was a thing who was like, we're making oil really expensive now. So we became this big consumer society that depends on using the dollar as a way to buy oil. I don't really know how all that works, but and then China also helps us to defeat the Soviet Union, which is why China is kind of rising nowadays, is because we took their side against the Soviet Union, and they had their own beefs, right? So China, Europe, and the U.S. sort of were like, yeah, fuck you, Russia, you're fucking dumb, fucking bitch. And we gradually moved manufacturing out to the rest of the world, which undercut, governments there, but then the corporations are kind of profiting off of that. But then as a sort of system, right, is this feasible? Are we heading toward another collapse in the Roman Empire? Well, you know what goes to help that as a response to this is disaster capitalism and financial capitalism, like stock markets, like bubbles, that sort of stuff. And this is kind of, it's hard to separate from technology, because part of financial capitalism is, technology, is these things that trade at high volumes, at high speeds. Before like the 80s, the stock market is like just this small line, and then recently it like spikes up. Before that, it's like 1,000. Now it's like 27,000. Before that, it's like, 1900 to 2000. It goes like 500 to 1,000 in like 80 years. Then it goes up 16,000 in 40 years, like the Dow Jones or whatever. So you can see that there's increased speculation, and that the sphere of power is going from kind of government bonds and these sort of multilateral arrangements like you had in the Cold War to like McDonald's. And that's why Russia lost, is because they were like, I need McDonald's. And so arguably what we have in the modern days is something more like Machiavelli's time, where there's more like mercenaries in power and shit like that. Do you need any more explanation? Fuck. And that's because of the communication era. It's because of tech. That's because of telephones, televisions, mass media. Because there's no more centralized rule. There's algorithms. There's no sense of control over all this that somebody could have had before, or regulation, or national sovereignty. There's just a patchwork of corporations that run the entire world. Now, so in the modern day, the question is, who's worse? Corporations or authoritarian dictatorships, right? And the idea of a democracy itself is complicated by sort of privilege and by the different amounts of control very privileged people have over politicians, no matter what the country is. And so we ask, should we have control over that? How can we as individuals make a better society? Oh no, I just said it. That's such a cheesy, make a better society. No. But anyway, I think that covers it. History, the whole scope of human history. I think I have like another video after this though. So, yeah. It's going to be about like tech and its place in our lives. But for now, my voice hurts, so I'm ending this video. And yeah. So, to recap, we had the agricultural revolution, we had writing, I guess you could say in a sense Abrahamic religions are pretty influential. I don't know in what sense. Then we had the Gutenberg press. Yep, and that was pretty good. Then after that we had like the Industrial Revolution, and there were two of those. There was also nationalism, which came from popular sovereignty, and mercantilism, and moving from feudalism to not just owning land, but doing enterprise and coming up with ideas and making new technology, and colonialism. So nationalism comes alongside colonialism. And then this sort of forms capitalism and communism, which themselves are sort of overarching systems that lead to kind of the communications era and the nuclear era and, our modern, physics and postmodernism and shit like that. Postmod. And these lead to financial capitalism, which leads to globalism, which, where do we go now? Yeah, that's basically it. And anthropology.